Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a fascinating session. I'm delighted to say we've got a host of representatives from EHMA, the European Hotel Managers Association, which I'm sure most of the audience will be very familiar with. And it gives us the opportunity to hear from each one of the delegates that are here this afternoon, and there's 7 of them, about their particular markets, what they're experiencing, and how things are going. So a snapshot from on the ground, literally. And as you can see, we've got a tremendous group of people. I'm going to introduce them as I ask them all to say a few words. And I think I should start with you, Ezio, not least of which, as the president of EHMA, and a man who has been in Milano through obviously a very, very tough period. I think it's only fair that we ask you to start. So Ezio is the president of EHMA. He's also the managing director of the Principe de Savoia, a wonderful hotel. Ezio, how is it in Milan now? And are you feeling optimistic?
Yes, I was born optimistic, and I stay optimistic even in this situation. Obviously, as you said, Milan was the first city in Europe to be hit by the coronavirus. So we had to face a lot of difficult situation that we had no experience whatsoever. The hospital were not really ready to get this, so many sick people of the coronavirus at the same time. That's why we had, a lot of people that passed away due to this, also because in the hospital there were not enough beds, and we also lost 150 doctors. Because I believe at the beginning, by not being aware in details of this pandemic, a lot of doctors themselves got infected and infected other people. So it was really a very, very bad situation. But said that, what is happening now in Milan? First of all, Milan and Lombardy is a red zone as much as many other regions in Italy. So basically, you don't have the possibility to move from one. You can move from within the region Lombardy, but that was only as of this Monday, because until last Friday, we could not move out of Milan. As a matter of fact, we could not move out of our home. We were blocked at home. And that was a tough exercise for all of us, because we were definitely not used to the lifestyle, of home, or managing the hotel, or managing the activities from home. Now we can move around. And the first thing that happened when we closed the hotel, that was back on the 10th of March, was to work with the government, and the government issued a law for paid redundancy, let's say, or government redundancy for all the employees. So we put all our employees, or at least 95% of them, on this paid redundancy, which will last now for 18 weeks. And this redundancy pays 1,000 or 1,100 euro net per employees, which is obviously considerably lower than what one would normally get as the monthly salary. So our company generously put the difference between the gross salary and the money that the government is giving us as the fund. So all our employees have the full-time job guaranteed and the full salary. So this is certainly something very, very positive. In addition to this, in Milan, we have started to open the shops, we have started to open the museums and so on, but the restaurants and the bar are still closed. Or better to say, they are open only for outsourcing. So you can come, you can order something and take it away. So this is something that really, hopefully, as of next week, it will change. So there is a new law decree that is due to come out in a matter of hours or days, either tonight or tomorrow, and this will give a lot of freedom to move around, and will give the authorization of the hotel to open the restaurants as well. But the fact is that until they don't remove the possibility of moving among the region And until there is not a law that allows foreigner people to come into Italy, because whenever they come, there is a quarantine that obviously make the possibility of opening the hotel impossible. That's why, as a hotel association, as EHMA and other hotel associations inside Italy, we got together and we put forward a series of requests to the government in order to make possible the reopening of the hotel. Because if the circulation is prohibited, airplanes are not coming, and there is the quarantine to be done by people coming into the country, obviously this will make impossible to operate. So we have asked the government to really come in our favor and to help us to overcome this difficult situation. The government, what we have asked the government in order to help the hotel association is really to put forward a huge amount of money as a non-refundable funds for the hotel for a partial business that they lost in these 4 months and the business that we will lose in the months to come. We have also asked the government, and hopefully they will accept it, not to pay the EMU. EMU is the property tax in Italy, because again, everybody is paying a lot of tax, but the property are all closed. And we also asked to have grants, loans for 15, 20 or 25 years at a very low interest in order to allow the companies to really get enough cash flow to really carry forward the business that we have now. So these are the major requests that we have put forward. But there is another situation in Italy, and it is that with the previous decree that came out, all the indications that are given in order to open the hotel, so to maintain the distance of people, to maintain the distance in the restaurant, the sanitation of the room, the sanitation of all the public areas, all the activities that you have to do for the entrance of the people, the staff canteen, the locker room, all these activities, if anything goes wrong, at the moment, the law has the right to pursue the owner of or the managing director on a penal court case. And obviously, we don't want this, and we have asked the government to remove this and leave it only as an administrative consequences if anything goes wrong. And hopefully, this will be accepted and put in place, because otherwise, none of the hotel will open. Another thing that we put forward for many of the hoteliers are not to pay the rent. Again, for these 4 or 5 months of this big crisis, is to really avoid to pay the rent. And this also will help many, many hotels that have really a huge rent to pay, and the hotel, in fact, are closed. So either the government sort this out directly with the hotel owner or with the operator of the hotel. But in any case, we are really asking the government to fund us in this area, because it's really extremely important for us to operate. Said that, we had foreseen to reopen the hotel in mid-June, but we will open the hotel only if what I said before will be in place. So the quarantine will be lifted, the free circulation of people inside the country, and there will be a lot of planes coming back to Italy, flying to Italy. Probably not as many as we had prior to the pandemic, but at least 40 or 50% of the plane will have to put the possibility to land in Italy without being subjected to quarantine. Really. Said this, when this will be lifted, then most of the hotel will open. Even though there are a few hotels in the resort, summer resort, that have already said that most probably this year they will not open. They will not open because opening for a couple of months only for them is too heavy, and they will find no economic reason to open. Hopefully this will not be many, but the situation is, said this in the city, we will all open as soon as the ban will be lifted.
Ezio, let me ask you a question, if I may. That
Please.
was a very useful introduction. There is a view beginning to form that the first travelers, if you like, and the first people that will start booking will be domestic. In other words, Italians.
Yes.
Do you share this view, or what are your thoughts on that?
We believe, yes, that obviously the domestic clients is an important share of our business, but is not big enough to justify the opening of the hotel. Because only with the domestic and the pandemic, because still on the domestic, many people don't like to travel, or if they can avoid traveling, they do avoid traveling, in particular to cities. Maybe they decide to go to the seaside for a vacation, but to come to Milano or any other city, I think there will not be so many. Obviously, if we were to open only with the Italian clients, we would not foresee to have an occupancy over 10, 12%. And this is definitely not enough to justify the opening of the hotel. And also the restaurants also will not have enough business. And the major problem that we have is not so much in the restaurant, but it's all the events. So groups, meetings, congress, private events, private function, exhibition, fashion shows, congresses. This is all impossible with the distancing law that we have now of 1 meter one another. Impossible to keep. So all the events section is basically cancelled. And this is, represent 35% of our business here at the Principe. And I'm not talking about the groups, only the functioning really. Then obviously you have also the bedroom linked to group, that with the existing distances will be almost impossible to cater for, really, to host them.
Thanks, Ezio. That was very helpful. Panos, perhaps I could turn to you for a minute. You're obviously the EHMA representative for Greece and Cyprus, and I know you're in Crete. How do you see it? There does seem to be quite a lot of suggestion at the moment that perhaps Greece will open up a little earlier, and that there seems to be a little bit of confidence beginning to emerge about the ability of Greek hoteliers to perhaps take advantage of some of the summer. Do you share that? And perhaps you can just give us a perspective from Greece at the moment and feedback. Panos, over to you and welcome.
Greece has been very proactive into proceeding to a general lockdown in an aggressive approach, if I may say, in the sense that the Prime Minister decided very early to close down even carnival festivities, which was back in February, prior to having fatalities. Now, this was coupled by a concise and consistent explanation to the public of why we need to follow the measurements in an effort to flatten the curve of the virus and reach the goal. Greek epidemiologists led the way very successfully by directing the public and at the same time by not panicking anyone. Let us not forget, you might have heard this very many times, but Greece, for the life in Greece is very much affected by tourism. 20% of our gross domestic product comes from tourism. Now, following the successful path that we had, Crete, the island that the property that I represent, Daios Cove, is situated, with a total population of 700,000 inhabitants, has not had one single virus incident over the last 2.5 weeks. Now, obviously, the restrictions have been described as amongst the strictest in Europe, but have kept the death toll much lower than many other countries. Several restrictions on free movement have been lifted, such as retail stores and schools that reopened last week and last Monday, restaurants at a later stage, and as Greece relies heavily, as we said, on tourism, we expect that hotels will follow. Unfortunately, amid the crisis that COVID has created, Greece is facing challenges when it comes to tour operators and travel agencies that produce 50% of the hotel business. And that was because obviously we were forced to terminate contracts, stop early booking payments, and so on. So we are partially suffering on that. Among proposals brought before the authorities have been the restructuring of hotel debts, the easing of borrowing and low interest rate loans, as well as employment subsidized from the government. In order for the state support effort to have any success, it will need to secure and strengthen the competitiveness of Greek tourism. Now, this, along with the reduction of value-added tax rates across the sector, like hotels, air travel, coastal shipping, and so on, the abolition of the overnight tax that we have, and subsidized state guarantees on bank loans are aspects that will be great tools for the Greek tourism restart. We are looking very much forward to bilateral agreements when it comes to the hygiene protocols, and I specifically state bilateral because Europe is composed of 27 nations. It is practically impossible for 27 nations to sit all together and come up with a common approach. So the Greek Tourism Ministry and the Ministry of External Affairs is currently working on a plan that have contacted already the feeder markets of Greece, like Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Israel, Russia, Poland, Scandinavia, and so on. And we're trying to form bilateral agreements based on the hygiene protocol of the World Health Organization.
How is that being done? Is that being led by the Ministry of Tourism with the Ministry of Tourism in each of those countries individually? Is there a working group? How do you actually do that?
Yes, I have to say that the whole rebirth, let's say, if I am allowed to say, of Greek tourism is directly led by the Greek Prime Minister. One of the greatest things that we have seen over this crisis, at least in Greece, is that we all got together and we have been very proactive into proceeding with the lockdown, but at the same time, we remain calm, serious, and determined to break these decisions. So the great thing about it is that we could immediately reach the government and give proposals, and I'm talking about hotel managers, I'm talking about different regions, large tour operators, and so on. So the great thing is that we've reached the Prime Minister's office, and he's put together a task force composed of different ministers who are working together on this plan, and they're contacting the same ministers in different countries. At the same time, I have to say that we're all very proud of a great campaign that Greece did. Now, for the first time in our tourism history since the beginning of the 50s, we started our campaign in January 20, which of course we were forced due to the pandemic to stop, as it would be detrimental to our image. So whilst we were in a lockdown, Greece has put together a campaign that is called Greece from Home. This campaign was a collective effort initiated by the Ministry of Tourism in collaboration with the Greek National Tourism Organization. Marketing Greece was in charge of Greece's marketing, Google, and the creative team of the Greek Prime Minister under Steve Ranakis. Steve Ranakis is an award-winning creative director who was the one launching iPhone and Amazon in the UK and NASA, the United Nations, UNICEF, and so on. So he was appointed as the first ever Chief Creative Officer for Greece to develop a new country narrative as a special advisor to the... Wow,
that's quite remarkable. Well, I have to say, it certainly sounds very, very positive. Stefan, perhaps I could turn to you and get a perspective from the Netherlands, if I could. You know, to the extent that we can see, the situation there has been similarly to Greece, relatively well controlled. What's the current sort of view in terms of how the lockdown is being eased and when hotels might start reopening?
Thank you, Nick. So this is the beach of Amsterdam, just outside Amsterdam. Holland was hit very hard on the south part, which is below the river, so not where the big cities are, with the Eindhoven area. The good news is that for the past 3 weeks, we had a decline in intensive care patients. And basically, the government announced last week that there's some light at the end of the tunnel as they closed down the restaurants and bars at March 15th, and only the hotels could remain open for the hotel guests, is that on June 1st, the Dutch restaurants and bar may reopen again. They got very strict rules to that. Only 30 people may be in the restaurant, including your chefs and including the staff as well. So that will be a challenge. Terraces can be open as well. And I guess what the Dutch government did, as they knew the character of the Dutch population, is they gave us an intelligent lockdown. And which meant that basically they let us believe that if we would act intelligently, it wouldn't be that bad. And most of us believed it as well, especially as we saw in the surrounding countries where people were really put home. The only advice we got was stay home, but you couldn't go anywhere else because they closed everything down. So it was a smart way to do. You see what's happening now is that the Dutch are basically going back to the parks or to the shopping streets. And there seems to be, will be a challenging time because the government also said, as soon as we're noticing that you won't keep up with rules, we will, to avoid the second wave of coronavirus, we will close down again. So on one hand, the Dutch hoteliers and the restaurant, the bars are happy for what will be happening. On the other hand, we have to keep in mind that they might suddenly decide to shrink everything back again.
And just to make sure I understood that correctly, Stefan, you're saying that the target date for reopening hotels and restaurants is
June.
How are you dealing with things like sort of bookings and sort of, are you seeing bookings coming in?
Well, we remained open, but basically until last week we only did room service, and now we opened up the restaurant for our guests, which means we're going now to about 25, 30 guests. We're on the beach, so we have still a lot of leisure business, hopefully picking up. But the challenge is that May 21st, as it's of course it's a Christian holiday, we will go to 150 rooms, and we will have 300 people in the hotel. And that will be quite a challenge, opening up restaurants for breakfast and logistics with elevators. So it will be a very trial and error situation, I guess, for the upcoming 2 weeks to go.
Yeah, well, I can only wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
Stuart, perhaps we can swivel around to yourself. You're obviously in London and managing director of Brown, a very well-known property. There was a comment made earlier today, and it's been, it seems to be a general sort of view at the moment that perhaps sort of leisure and domestic leisure in particular will lead the way, and gateway cities, to Ezio's point, which are far more reliant on international demand, will lag. What's your perception in terms of how London sort of fares from this point forward, and what are you hearing from your colleagues in the market?
Well, we're being represented initially by and also very strongly by the new West End company to try and get the centre of London regenerated and reworking. There's no doubt that we need the restaurants and shops all to be open for whatever side of business, from a leisure point of view, to come into the city.
And the folks at the West End, I mean, how do you feel that government is responding to the entreaties? Because it feels a bit from where I'm sitting that hospitality per se is sort of right down at the end of the list of everything that's going to open, and that frankly they're sort of, as Stefan just said, it's a little bit of trial and error, understandably. Any sort of thoughts beginning to emerge as to when things might start to actually be making or accommodating guests again? Can you even predict that at this stage?
we're at the moment going through various anticipated forecasts to understand what may or may not happen, given our Prime Minister's presentation on Sunday evening and yesterday in Parliament, Rishi Sunak's presentation today, which initially, from a financial point of view, has, of course, given support to every single team member in every industry right up until the end of October, and will give us huge flexibility with bringing in staff. In relation to business coming back, I think that we are all of the opinion that we just need government to ensure that the country is moving again, that industry is back in place, that they are broadcasting to the rest of the world, that if they bring in quarantine, that will be another nail.
Yeah, which is a very worrying situation, obviously, not least of which because everyone who leaves the country and comes back is going to have to endure the same situation.
Exactly.
So
I mean, very much with Ezio, I mean, we're all, I think, concerned of the reduction in the ability of being able to welcome guests as and when they come because of social distancing.
Yes. Well, I was interviewing Frank Gervais, who's the CEO of Accor, earlier on this afternoon, and obviously Accor have a huge stable of brands, but you do struggle to understand how the sort of high touch luxury experience can be delivered at 2 meters, and how you can interact with people from behind perspex screens, but it seems that is going to be the way it works. And I think what we see.
It's funny that you say perspex screens. It's something that actually we're not looking to do if we can help it. We want to rely upon masks, rely upon communication and understanding from our guests, and training from our team members to ensure that they maintain a distance at all times.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm sure you've been watching the situation with the Four Seasons in New York, which obviously was in some ways a pioneer of how you do it. I don't know whether or not it's regarded as a model, but it's going to be very, very challenging. I can understand your concern, not least of which because of the macro environment and the uncertainty around how that works and your obvious dependence on international travelers. We need the airlines to be functioning. We need people to be confident enough to get on airplanes. There are so many parts of this puzzle that need to be in place for someone to actually physically get to the point where they would think about checking into a hotel. Manuel, perhaps Manuel de Vasconcelos, I can turn to you in Monaco, the Meridien Hotel. I know it well. I remember it well. I've stayed with you previously. How is the situation in particular in Monaco from your perspective, but in France, because you're also the EHMA delegate for France, and how do you perceive what the government is doing in France at the moment? Is it regarded as on top of the situation in terms of how this will sort of move going forward, or are you concerned? Because we've obviously got very different opinions beginning to emerge on the panel here.
Hello, everybody. I hope you had a nice day when you came over here, Nick. I don't remember seeing you, but I hope you will be able to see soon, very shortly, in other circumstances.
I hope so.
I think we are all learning a lot with this situation, and even if it's very odd and nobody was expecting it, but we're all learning a lot with it. That's for sure. We're all going to have stories to tell to our little children in 30 years' time, hopefully. And I think the governments themselves in Monaco, I think they're doing a fantastic job. There are only 96 cases in Monaco so far, and the population is 38,000 inhabitants, but only 96 cases, pretty well controlled. And I think all the countries, all the governments, I think they're doing their best actually. But it's a very difficult situation, and they try to learn one from the other one, and to learn the experiences from China who started before, from South Korea who started. I mean, it's for somebody who has to take decisions at a national wide, at the country level, it's pretty difficult, and the responsibility is very, very high. I'm pretty sure that whatever says the prime minister or the president in Paris, there is people who are against and people who are pro. They say, no, it's going too soft, no, it's going too hard, and I want to go out and I want to stay home. And we all see people that want to stay home and not seeing everybody. And then you have other people that want to go out, and you walk on the streets and you see full of people without any mask, without any gloves, without anything. And they say, what is going on here? Are we all in the same mood, or we are in completely different moods? And as strange as it can be, and we were talking among that with the other colleagues of EHMA the other day, it's strange how Europe we cannot get it on some basic things that should be the same. And I agree what Panos said before. We are 27 nations, it's all very different. But gosh, basic things. Italy says the social distancing is Italy is 1.5 and France is 1 meter, and my company says it's 2 meters. Gosh, how can we, with 1 meter, 1.5 meters, and 2 meters, can we just agree on something basic? Because we have to talk, and when I say I have to talk because I am a general manager and I have my employees and my clients, but the governments, they have all the population to talk with. And how can somebody understand why a country says 1 meter and the other one says 1.5 and the other one says 2? I mean, what's the logical in this thing? It's just to prove to somebody that we are better or more strict or less strict. I think it's very kind of strange. And as I give the benefit of the doubt, and I think they all have a very hard task, all the politicians, in one sense, I would love to see some more closeness in the point. At least the basic things, I think, should be the same in Europe.
Yeah, I can understand your frustration, and I think we all feel it. I mean, you know, talking entirely from the situation in the UK, and in particular in London, where I am, you know, together with Stuart, you know, it's interesting. The government says something, and then you see a poll of people, and apparently 70% of the public, you know, have no particular desire to leave the security of their own home.
There you are.
Well, if you've got 70% of the country thinking they don't want to actually step outside their front door, you know, how on earth are we going to convince them to go and stay in a hotel? So, you know, I hear you loud and clear. It is a very mixed situation out there in terms of how people are responding to it. Verena, maybe I can turn to you for a minute.
Yeah, it's just one thing, Nick. Sorry. As Ezio was saying, we were talking before, how the restaurants should open. See the subject of the restaurants. Every country is discussing the subject of the restaurant. One opens this day, one 2 weeks later, and 2 weeks later. That there is no agreement on the whatsoever is the basic rules how to open a restaurant, how the cooks should be protected, how the server should serve the food. We see nothing on common with everybody. And this morning I was in the dentist. And this morning when I was at the dentist, I said, gosh, if I can come to the dentist, why shouldn't people be able to come and eat in my restaurant? Gosh, there shouldn't be no more dangerous position nowadays than one of the dentists. I mean, he's facing you with your open mouth and everything. This should be the most dangerous one, no?
I totally agree with you. It certainly sounds more dangerous than eating a steak. Yeah, there you go. I'll remember that comment in this interview for a long time. It's if you can go to the dentist, you should be able to go for dinner, right?
Right.
Listen, I hear you. I hear you, Verena. You're here as a delegate for Central Europe, which is a sort of, a big part of Europe. What are your perspectives on how this is being handled and how things are easing? Because we hear a lot, for instance, about the Czech Republic, how successful they've been, easing up quite early, and generally the news seems to be, in as much as you can say, a little bit more positive. Would you?
Generally spoken, the situation we've had during the last 2 months was something completely new to all of us. And every government was doing its best on its own way. And Austria especially, I can say, is now in the lucky situation due to very strict regulations we were facing during the past time, that we were able to keep the Cove very, very flat, and that we already started to open some businesses during the past 2 weeks. But the tourism business, which is one of the most important economy factors in Austria, is still closed. However, hotels are assumed now to open at the end of May. But as we all know, opening a hotel is the one thing, but getting the business in is something different. This all will depend on how the situation will be with the other countries. If the borders will still be closed so that we can only focus on domestic tourism during the summer period, or if Austria will start making bilateral agreements, especially with the Czech Republic or with Germany, and so that we can get those travelers in. However, at the end of the day, when I take a look into the summer period, which is a very strong leisure period in Austria, we will not be able to cover the loss of international travelers, especially in cities like Vienna. Vienna has been full of Arabic people from the United Emirates year by year, and all those businesses will definitely not be back during the next month.
And tell me, Verena, to the point that Manuel just made, is there a common understanding of the practicalities of how this will work in terms of how staff will come back to work and how staff will be protected, and if they will feel safe enough to come back to work? Because I think, we're talking about the return of demand, but we also need to recognize that, we need people that are working with us and for us to feel comfortable and safe. To the point that Manuel's just made about, what is the protocol for chefs working in a restaurant? Do you feel that how do you feel that situation is being handled?
Well, we have some regulations for Austria that people working in the service, they need, and also on the reception, they need to wear the mask. So all team members that are in direct contact with the guests, they have to wear a mask. However, a chef in the kitchen, there is no need to do so. So, and I fully agree with Manuel that it would be necessary to have guidelines on those, I name it minimum basic standards for all the countries that need to be the same, because the virus is the same all over the world.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let me talk to Manuel Otero from the wonderful city of Savoia. Manuel, lovely to see you. Obviously, has had a pretty challenging period. What's the mood at the moment? Do you think that you've now passed through the worst of it? Are people feeling a bit more?
Yes, and I like the slogan of this conference, follow the sun. The sun is the light, it's the future, and it's a hope. So maybe the sun is the light at the end of the tunnel. So I like the slogan. You were speaking about the protocols, and yesterday the government of Spain, the Ministry of Tourism and the Institute of Spanish Tourist Quality have published 12 health protocol documents. Each document is a different sector in tourism. There is one for hotels, another one for camping sites, for museum, for travel agency, for everything. We have now the document ready for each one who won't open his business or his public tourist institution. So we are ready.
That's amazing. Let me ask a question of all of you. You know, there's some questions coming through from the audience, and one of the comments is, you know, that it appears at the moment that perhaps the sort of approach being taken by some of the big operators is to make big, bold statements about how they're going to assure hygiene and safety, almost as a sort of marketing approach to sort of say, look, you can come and stay with us because you'll be safe. Whereas, you know, interestingly, earlier on today, I also got the flip side of that, which was Accor saying that they're sharing everything that they're doing, or most of it, with the wider industry. I'm sure that's something you would have a perception about in France, Manuel, if that's true. But it does strike me that maybe, you know, particularly as it relates to staff and our people, that maybe it's up to organizations like EHMA to actually lead the way in terms of what constitutes acceptable practice and what our staff should feel is an acceptable standard of safety to come to work. One of the more worrying statistics in the UK recently was that chefs apparently are somewhere in the order of, certainly more likely, let's put it that way, I won't quote the number because I don't want to get it wrong, but are certainly more likely to perish from this than if you were doing another job. Now you have to ask yourself, why is that? And you know, the other people in that group were taxi drivers and bus drivers, and you begin to realize that they're obviously people that, you know, interact with people a lot. The challenge we've got as a hospitality industry is it literally involves, you know, not only interacting with guests but your colleagues. Is any sort of approach being taken by EHMA in terms of laying down guidelines or looking at how that should be done? Maybe Ezio, you could say.
Yes, we tried to do something in this direction, but it became almost impossible. Impossible because each country has its own rule, its own laws, its own decree from the government. So to put, you know, a protocol that could be shared among all the delegates, among all the members of EHMA throughout Europe, it was pretty difficult.
Right.
We got, on the other end, the protocol. Each hotel has made its own protocol, and I'm sure that if we put everything together, I'm sure that there will be a lot of common grounds to work and come out with a common procedure, working protocol. But, you know, this was really taken by surprise by each one of us. And so we had to struggle to create our own protocol inside our own company that could be accepted by our own company itself. It's not only the hotel, but it's the company as well. And to put it, you know, to extend it for EHMA, it has been pretty difficult, you know. But, you know, that's what a good lesson, and it will teach us for the future that maybe if anything, not as bad as this one, hopefully, but to really think not so much country-wise, but to think European-wise and have protocols that, you know, can really be shared among every nation inside Europe. Maybe in other issues, because in this issue, we talk about an health issue, and, you know, you have to follow what the doctor says. You have to follow what the OMS says or what the health institution of a country says, and you have no possibility, you know, to say, but in Germany they do it differently because the law in each country is different.
Yeah.
No. So we found it extremely difficult, almost impossible, the same protocol throughout Europe, really, because health was involved, really, and there were a lot of how would you say declaration from the medical teams that were again interpreted by the government and so applied in a completely different way, one country to the other. Yeah. It was not an easy task.
It's not.
And we did not achieve that. Yeah.
It's not. Actually, the challenge we've got is, as has been pointed out several times, you have 27 countries, but there isn't a common approach, as we know. So, when your own countries are issuing guidelines which might differ between 1 meter and 2 meters.
But I can say, Nick, on the other end, what we did was to share information among us, because many members of the association put on our app, Beekeeper, a lot of information linked to its own hotel or its own city or its own country to be shared among the members, and a lot of us picked up good ideas from the other. So it was a matter really of good practicing rather than a protocol, a unique protocol.
Yeah.
But that became very, very useful. A lot of information has been shared. Yes.
As our friend Michael Gray has just pointed out on the chat box, ultimately EHMA is a fantastic forum for sharing best practice. And I guess if nothing else happens but the sharing of what you're all doing, then others can at least be aware of it and decide whether or not they think it's something that they could adopt or share further.
And on the other end, we just did another thing, Nick, in terms of European. We put together a letter that ideally that was done yesterday. So we sent it already to the president of the European Community, to the president, to the Prime Minister of Italy, the Minister of Italy, and many other national delegates already, or are in the process of forwarding it to their own government, in order to state that EHMA is a strong company, it's a strong association representing 420 hoteliers around the world, and that we all share the concern that the tourism has been very, very badly hit, and all governments should really pay a lot of attention in order to have all the hotel business recover in all the European countries, really. It was more of a social letter, really, but fostering, the need of help for all the hotel activities throughout the country, throughout Europe, really, yeah.
Well, listen, gentlemen and lady, I have to say we're at the end of our. I think it's been really marvelous to hear from you all, and I'd really like to thank you all for your time. I've known EHMA for a very, very long time. I think it's an amazing organization, and it only gives me to wish all of you very best of luck. As someone who spends his life trying to stay in hotels, an immensely important thing for me to make sure that you all get to reopen so that I can come and enjoy your hospitality once again. So
we look forward to welcoming you.
Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to doing this again. Many thanks.
Grazie. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See you in Sevilla.